Hey everybody, this is Counselor Curtis. You are listening to and watching the Jimmy Doan Show. Jimmy Doan is here.
Hey there.
So you may be watching this show live. As you can see from our image here, we are doing the show live now twice a week, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays and Sundays. Today is Wednesday, the 11th of July, 2018.
7-Eleven.
7-Eleven. I love 7-Elevens. I always call every Jiffy Mart a 7-Eleven,
Yeah.
no matter what. Just because I guess the one that was closest to me as a child was a 7-Eleven, so.
Of course, closest to me as a child, there weren't any.
There was no convenience stores?
No.
What?
No. Well, actually, no. In fact, interestingly enough, the drugstores were actual drugstores.
Right.
See, you go in there and got drugs.
Uh-huh.
And, it was it's just one of those things. But
Pick up a candy bar.
No, I don't remember. They might have taught a couple of little things, but nothing like today.
Right.
They didn't, they didn't sell film or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And
What's
of course,
film?
Yeah, I know what's film, right? I know that's exactly right. What's film? So anyway, today is another exciting news day since we were on last Sunday.
Man, I saw very little.
Did you?
What did you?
Well, the main thing I saw, of course, was the one thing was the let me get my list here. Hell no, Kavanaugh. Now,
Oh yeah.
One of the things that was,
Court pick.
I mean, it was interesting that all the signs were made up in advance, and it said "Hell no blank,"
Sure.
and so
Sure, it was a different warehouse with each one.
Right, exactly.
Filled full of them.
And, I mean, it was interesting. It was interesting that literally, within 10 minutes, maybe 20, there was a "Hell no, Kavanaugh" out in front of the Supreme Court marchers.
Well, there was one story that somebody's running, which says that ABC, or I guess, ran a reaction about how it was such an awful pick before the pick was announced.
Right.
Who knows?
Well,
but you knew they were going to oppose whatever pick.
Oh well, no, they've already said it. Let me just see here now. There are a couple things. First of all, a couple of the leaders, more or less leaders and sub-leaders in the Senate, and interestingly in the House, even though they have nothing to do with it, have said they're going to fight this tooth and nail. And I think, as we've talked about before, unless something serious happens, there's nothing they can do.
Tooth and nail all you want.
Yeah, you tooth and nail, because if
you know, when they're using, here's my new theory, is whenever they start to use a metaphor for what action they're either taking or should be taking, they have no plan.
Right.
You know, we're going to fight tooth and nail. Well, it means nothing.
Yeah,
it
right.
means nothing.
Well, the tooth and the nail.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
So.
Well, it's interesting.
We'll see. We'll test it over the.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, as we mentioned last time, is that Mitch has already said he's going to call for a vote sometime in September.
Yeah.
And so the hearings, all the hearings, the borking of this guy, whatever they're going to do, obviously the Democrats in the Senate are going to try and bork him.
They're going to bork the hell out of him.
Yeah, and but again, Mitch is certainly not going to call for a vote unless he has the votes.
Right.
I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah.
So he says he's going to call for a vote. So you can bet that the Susan Collins and whoever else is the one from Alaska or something, they're going to get. Well, we're going to talk about Alaska here in a minute, but they're going to get some goodies in order to make sure that they vote. I mean, it must be nice if you're really in the catbird seat. It gets to the point where maybe you don't need their vote, but then of course your bribe goes way down. But if you do need it, it goes way up, and that's what they do. Interesting. I saw the thing that Joe Scarborough launched into a Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani on Monday Morning Joe, in a rant that included a lengthy list of his client's biggest scandals. This is the most corrupt administration in the history of our lifetime, certainly over the first year and a half, said Scarborough. Now, what's interesting, you can Google this, scandals of Obama administration. Now, realize that's over the 8 years. And what Scarborough is talking about here is the first 6 months. Of course, a lot of the stuff aren't really. One of the scandals is the collusion, for instance, with Russia, which There's no evidence of that.
Not yet.
Not yet, right? But they're counting it as if it were that is a big deal. But they forget about Fast and Furious. They forget about Benghazi. They forget
what scandal has happened in the Trump administration? I mean, seriously, what scandal? He withdrew
Stormy
from the
Daniels.
peace. What? It's not a crime to sleep with a call girl. It may be against his.
Well,
his
of course,
marriage
it was 10,
or whatever.
12 years ago. I mean,
right.
Also says, but I mean, that's the scandal.
That's not a scandal.
I know that. What I'm saying is that's what they're hanging their hat on. But it's interesting that they have he launched into the most corrupt administration.
Right.
And I'm thinking, wait a minute,
most corrupt.
Well, Grant was corrupt and Harding was corrupt. I mean, that was Teapot Dome. Grant was pretty corrupt. That was up until recently. That was the most corrupt administration.
A lot of the times, as you are noting, I think he who gets to frame the scandal gets to name the scandal. Basically, it's like, and half of those things are just not even remotely scandals. I mean, what Trump says about some woman is not a scandal.
Right.
It's a statement. It may be
I look
ugly.
at this.
You may not like it, but it's not a scandal. A scandal is you funnel $800 million to a company that goes bankrupt in 6 months.
Right.
Cylinder, or
you get a donation from some Russians of millions and millions of dollars in exchange for a uranium sale. That kind of
something
stuff.
like that, right? Things that are big and blatant, but sure. I mean, I would imagine every administration is involved in one or two things.
Well, it's interesting, and we can talk a little bit about this. But one of the big there's a thing, and I don't know if the guy I had him on another piece of paper. There are 5 things that they claim are going to stop. Did I talk about this last time? 5 things that they claim they're going to use to stop the hearings. In other words, you can hold against Kavanaugh.
Okay. What?
Well, one is they need to make sure he's going to absolutely say that Roe v. Wade, where he's on Roe v. Wade. They're going to bring up something that he said.
If he's at all savvy, they won't be able to pin him down on that.
No, I know, but I forget what the 5 things are. But they're going to try and pin him down on these 5 things. I should have brought him over, have this on another piece of paper.
Are there legal, in other words, legal judgments?
Right.
They have to do with specific cases, overturning specific policies and cases and stuff.
Right. And
there's no way. Those things are by nature off
Well, one of the
limits.
things that he did, so here's what they said. Here's what he said. On one of his things as an attorney, as a judge, when he was a judge before, one of his rulings, he said, well, in so many words, he said, we have to follow the precedent set by the Supreme Court. This is on a lower court. And of course, they want him to make sure that if he's going to be following precedent, that he won't overturn. Well, the point is that on the lower courts, you're not allowed to do this, overturn precedent. You have to follow what the Supreme Court says. When you're on the Supreme Court, au contraire, that's when you can go and overturn the precedents.
Right.
But the lower courts have an obligation. The ruling that's handed down by the Supreme, so they're going to try and hang their hat on that and say, well, you've already said that you can't overturn a precedent. So what about Roe v. Wade? And of course, he's going to have to dance around that and say basically, well, he's going to have to somehow merely. How can I?
Here's the way you say it,
Okay.
and this is the way that the only way that it can be said is simple. There are several different legitimate bases for constitutional law, and they overlap in certain ways. That is to say, the Constitution itself, the literal words that it has, obviously controls. But where there's some vagueness or some ambiguity between the words, then you look towards things like precedent, or other constitutional principles, or some parallelism, or things like that. There's different things you can look towards. Well, what they'll try to do is they'll try to pin him down at where he says, you can abandon precedent because you can, but at the same time, you're supposed to follow precedent where you can, or where it's clear. If the precedent, as you say, as I say, if you're looking at the Constitution and there's no answer there, there's some gray area between the lines of the Constitution, and then you look to precedent and there's no answer there because there's a gray area between the precedent, then you can create a new precedent. But obviously there's some argument as to whether or not those first two levels have been met. That is to say, is it really a new case, or are you just making some crap up?
Right.
Or
he's made it pretty clear that he's a textualist. He's gonna.
Well, you say that, but he's the guy who gave us the Obamacare is a tax theory.
Right.
And that's not textualism.
Again, but that was. I think what he's found out is he's learned his lesson from that, and we'll see.
Could be, and I agree that most of the other quotes that you see of his seem to be constitutionalist, textualist type of rulings, but it's just so easy. If you're going to write any opinion for any court, you're going to use phrases like the Constitution is the law of the land, and the judge cannot make law, the judge must follow the law. Those types of platitudes are just replete in any type of a
Well,
court
they're going to
ruling.
try, as I say, since Bork, they've learned that they cannot answer a question. How would you rule on this? They're going to
Right.
say, I have to see it. So
Exactly.
and it's not here yet. We have to see. And I would think that one of the things that would be interesting if I were in his shoes, if I got to be a justice on the Supreme Court, would be to go through all the dissents, because some of the dissents are pretty compelling.
Absolutely.
And when some of that stuff comes up, you might want to quote some dissents and say,
that's what you do whenever you do research on an issue.
Yeah,
If
that's
you
what
really
law
wanna
clerks
know.
are for.
Yeah.
So anyway, that.
Well, my hope is, of course, that they find a way to detonate Kavanaugh so that Kethledge gets appointed.
Oh no, I don't. Why would you say that?
Well, I'm just joking,
Okay.
really. But because I like Kethledge's opinions a little bit better.
He's going to have a chance.
Maybe so.
I mean, as they showed a picture of Ginsburg.
But but you know what's going to happen when Ginsburg goes going to put another woman on there, and they're going to say it's been 4 guys in a row if you put another guy or whatever. And
they still got this. Well, they'll still have 2 women.
I know.
And but again, somebody said that she's in carbonite.
Right.
So who knows? They're going to resurrect her out of the carbonite. It's interesting. I'm pretty sure that on a couple of levels that Trump's going to continue for another 6 years, and that there will be at least one more opening, and that's when he could do your Kethledge or whatever the hell it is. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Next item. With the Trump administration. Let me just see here. Trump administration on Tuesday released a list of 10% tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, making the president's recent threats to escalate a broadening trade war with Beijing. And the $200 billion figure we're looking at is roughly equal to their exports with us. It's kind of interesting. A senior administration. When compiling a list of goods, the U.S. trade, here's what I like, always the last sentence in the paragraph. The U.S. trade representative took account on what could cause disruptions to China's economy. I mean, that to me, one of the things about tariffs is kind of the same thing as, I suppose I know what he's doing and everything, but the fact is that tariffs are kind of like sanctions in a way. And that's like a declaration of war. I mean, if you're going to specifically target things to disrupt the economy, without regards to anything else, I mean, that's.
Well, I never bought into the whole economic justification for war. That is, World War I and our prior wars were, we sort of had this concept that if you interfere with our trade routes, we're going to kick your butt.
Right.
Well, that's not. You better be prepared. That's not necessarily, to me, a war issue.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, because it really. I mean, if those two countries are at war and you're just sort of the third party trader to one of them, trader, Trader, then. It's an ancillary, the the interruption to trade is meant to hurt them, not you. And even though it hurts you and your trading partner, it's not, to me, an existential threat, which is what's required to go to war. Something that is going to seriously impact the functionality of the country, as they're talking about. Well, they're not talking about serious impact. They're talking about minor impacts. But let's just say, for example, if we got 80-90% of our oil from some country, and somebody wanted to interdict that flow, okay, that's a huge blow to us, and we might decide that that's such a big thing that we would want to go to war on it. I mean, but from my perspective, you only would go to war if there is a threat to your borders or your internal trade in some way. External trade is nice. It's wonderful. It's what you want, but it's not something to go to war over, from my perspective.
It's interesting because the German submarines were sinking our ships on the way, taking stuff to England.
Right. Well, that's different. If they're sinking our ships, then they're attacking us. And
right.
We're certainly
that's
allowed
what
to
they
protect
were doing.
Us. You know.
And then, of course, we set up a blockade around Cuba to keep Russians from getting in there before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And,
right. That was obviously a military strategic thing.
Right.
You know,
right.
we weren't trying to kill them economically at that point.
And still trying to kill them economically after 60 years or whatever it's been.
Right. But, I mean, so, you know, from my perspective, look, this is just BS meddling. We know what he's trying to do. He's trying to scare them into dropping their trade barriers, and then hopefully he would drop his as a magnanimous gesture in return.
Right.
That's the best possible scenario. Is somebody, you know, the Chinese say, you know what, we don't want that kind of pain. Forget it. We'll drop ours if you drop yours.
Right.
You know, we'll show you ours. And so that's what I have to think. But the problem again is that the only way he ratchets it up is with the gun to his own head, to our head.
Yeah.
And the higher it goes, the worse it is for everybody. It's a
lot of our
option.
industry. Yeah, a lot of our exports are hurting gators.
It's a nuclear option to cut off our trade routes. Destroys the wealth of the trade circle.
Well, of course the fact that they've done some embargoes on our quote allies in Europe, of course, and then of course he goes over there. He's over there right now. Am I in Belgium? No, I'm at the war.
Yeah, well, we're gonna teleport to Belgium right now.
Okay.
Bam.
Okay, here we are in Belgium now. The thing that's interesting about the Belgium is the first thing he did was to insult the Germans.
Right. Well, I mean, you saw what he did. Obviously, he went in there, he teamed up with Putin, and he threatened Europe with nuclear war. And
no,
that's how I heard it.
No, yeah, I know that's right. No, not quite.
That wasn't what happened?
No, that was not it.
All right, what did you hear?
He said, what did he say? He said that that Germany. I think he basically said that they weren't. Oh, that they were friends with Russia. Because they had a pipeline.
Right.
They have an oil pipeline.
And now they're going to get 60-70% of their oil
from Russia. You know, and this is so they're colluding with the Russians.
Right.
You know, and this is not a friendly thing. And maybe they shouldn't get their oil from. Where else are they going to get it from? Number one.
Right.
And that hardly is colluding. That's hardly being a friend.
Right.
Of Russia.
Right.
And of course,
what he says is they're giving Russia billions and billions of dollars.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, it's actually for oil that they have to have. Right. I'm sorry. It's called trade.
You know what this is, though, right? I mean, you see through this whole thing. That entire narrative right there.
Yeah.
Was a shakedown.
Okay.
For extra cash, and the concept being he wants them to come out and say we are independent. We stand, you know, on our own. And then he's going to say, "Great, pay your fair share."
Right, on NATO.
Right. And what he also did was he goes over there, and this is brilliant. Also, he goes over there and he says, "Now you know the distribution of NATO funds, right?"
No.
Okay. Well, here I have a cool graphic for our listener. Oops, I meant to do that. I swear I have a cool graphic. There it is. So what we have here on the left is we have a bunch of NATO countries, and we have their spending in NATO as a percentage of their GDP.
Okay.
Which is how NATO measures your contribution
Right.
level. Everybody's
Right,
supposed
right.
to give in 2%.
Of their GDP. Okay, so
Right.
where does it cross the line?
Okay, so the line is like 5 countries down here.
Okay.
Only 5 countries pay more than 2%.
And is Germany one of them?
No, not even
Okay,
close.
okay.
Germany is way down the list here at 1.18%.
Okay.
So they basically are getting away with like $40 billion annually that they should be contributing to the NATO funds.
Ah, yes. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So he's just shaking them down. Now, and
Okay.
also, this is brilliant. If you look at these percentages here, we pay about 3 3/4 or 3 2/3%.
Okay.
So we're up close to 4%, right? The next highest country, which interestingly is Greece.
And of course, their GDP is 0.
Well, right. Well, right, that's right. They give us $1.50.
Right. Or a drachma and a half or whatever.
That's right. At 2.5%. Poland 2.125%. Estonia and the United Kingdom at right around 2%. Okay, Estonia. Interesting.
Yeah, Estonia, right.
Yeah, it's because they're right. They got that little Russian piece of land that goes right up into their
border,
gut, basically.
Right.
But here's the situation. All these countries pay, all the ones below that pay less than 2%. They're all getting away with a buttload of cash. What he does, he goes over there and he says, he doesn't threaten to reduce our percentage to 2, okay? Yeah. Instead, he calls for everybody to raise their percentage to 4. That's his pitch to them.
Okay.
So what's great about this is we're real close to 4 anyway.
Yeah.
And of course, what is their reaction? And it was perfect. They come out immediately and they say, well, let's just go for 2 first. And that's of course what he wanted.
Right.
He wanted just everybody just get your ass up to 2. That's what the line is. And so you demand 4, and they meet you not even
that's
halfway.
his classic. Of course he talks about that. You ask for the moon and settle for
everybody. That's classic bargaining.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. That's the way you do it. And hell yeah, it is. And so hopefully he's gonna shake him down for a little cash.
Well, it's of course now he's getting ready to go see Putin, and it'll be interesting to see. Everybody's thinking that he's going to go over there and find out. He's going to go over there and say, "Can you really mess up our midterm elections too?"
Right. Yeah. Right.
Can you collude? I'm over here to collude.
That's exactly right. Everybody that I know thinks Trump is Putin's bitch.
I know.
Swear to God.
Right.
They all think, and I'm like, what is his motivation? They're like, money, and I'm like, really? I mean, really? Like, no matter what you believe, no matter what you believe, he has got to have hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, ostensibly he has billions of dollars, $10 billion. Okay? Even if that's wildly off, he still has hundreds of millions of dollars, which is just a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
What could he why would he sell out everything and everyone for what?
Well, he's going to, and again, I think that he's probably aware, being the negotiator and everything that he's in the persuader and all that, is that I think he realizes that the momentum is building for not a blue wave, but a reaction to the blue wave.
Oh, it could be, yeah, it could be.
And I mean, I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see a couple of extra Senate seats.
Can you imagine if he got both houses or something?
Well, he's already got them, but I mean, if he
like a solid majority.
But I mean, a solid majority, right?
Right.
I mean, if he got, like, instead of 1 extra Republican in the Senate, they had 4 or something, and it's going to be interesting to see how bitter this election gets. Okay, moving on. I'm going to talk a little bit about here in the United States. This is kind of interesting. Alaskans just got some good news and some bad news. First, the good news is the state budget deficit, and again, I don't know how this is percentage-wise. $2.4 billion just a few months ago has been cut to about $700 million. It's been cut way down. So
okay.
That's the deficit. That's still large by state standards, but not enough to convince Standard & Poor's to revise its outlook. Now, the bad news. This is interesting. Reducing the deficit required Governor Bill Walker and the state legislature to do something Alaska has never done before. It is dipping into the Alaska Permanent Fund. It's the state's oil wealth. What happens is the state, like Norway, gets a bunch of money from the oil leases,
from the pipelines.
Yeah, the pipeline, which is supposed to belong to the citizens. And in fact, as a result, the annual dividend that every man, woman, and child receives from the fund will drop to $1,600 from almost $2,700. Last year, every man, woman, and child got a $2,700 check as a dividend from the state's wealth fund. Well, what's interesting is, and now they're all going to be cut to $1,600, and they talk in here about the problems of people are going to sit there. Wait a minute, my electric bill is my utility bill is $400 or $500 just to stay warm and blah blah blah. But what's interesting is what the state giveth, the state can take away. Number one, and number two, this is the same thing they do here in Florida when they raid the trust funds, and in order to balance the budget. And of course, then the feds have often raided Social Security in order to temper, when the Social Security income is spent immediately. And so it's in other words, they're raiding the Social Security trust fund, if you want to call it that, and putting more debt in the lockbox. But I mean, this is classic government. This is something that they sort of made a promise to the citizens of Alaska. Now, apparently, they weren't thinking too much about the fact that the oil might run out someday. And of course, now they've gotten clearance, I think, to go into the national park up there or something. I mean, which is like millions of acres, and start to drill up in that area. But of course, that's way in the future. But still, it's not like they didn't get the $2,700 per citizen. They just decided to rake off $1,000 per citizen in order to balance or pay down in order to pay for their normal governmental needs, instead of cutting back on the governmental needs, but what they call the needs. So it's just interesting. It says a loaf of bread in Juneau costs more than $5. Energy bills in Fairbanks can run $500 per month. Well, okay, so $5 loaf of bread. Yeah, but I mean, it's expensive to live in Alaska.
Yeah.
No more expensive than it is to live in San Francisco.
Yeah, or Hawaii.
Right.
It's, when you're in a remote situation, when you're in a remote place, there's going to be shipping costs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the.
Well, not only that, there are 6 months out of the year you can't get to some of those places.
And opportunity costs.
Right. Okay. Next. 5 years ago, a 25-year-old radical libertarian, Cody Wilson, stood on a remote central Texas gun range and pulled the trigger on the world's first fully 3D printed gun.
25 years ago?
It says here 25-year-old.
Oh.
5 years ago.
I was like,
no, 5 years ago.
Right.
And he was 25 then. He's 30 now, I guess. When to his relief, his plastic invention fired a .38 caliber bullet into a berm of dirt without jamming or exploding in his hands, and he drove back to Austin and uploaded the blueprints for the pistol to his website, and it's called defcad.com, I think. Defcad.com, whatever that is. Okay. Well, of course, it wasn't too long before the feds came after him, and they arrested him, and for I'm trying
distributing to think. Firearms.
Well, yeah, interstate commerce, because he, and they figured that it had been, and he had to take it down pretty quick, and it was in like a week or two or something. But it had been downloaded, all over the world. So they were going to get him for international arms distribution. Well, he sued and won.
Okay.
And the court said no.
Did the ruling just come out?
Yeah, that's why I'm doing it now. Yeah, he launched it. He's now able, as of not too long ago, was able to. They said the court. I don't know if it was the Texas court or what. I don't think it was the Supreme Court, but might have been. But they basically said that's not interstate commerce. Anything you put on the web, tough. Why
don't you send me a link? I'd have done some legal research.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I could have done that. So anyway, it's now you can just see, and so his website now is a clearinghouse for everybody that wants to send their 3D design for guns. I mean, it's just, and he's done, apparently a lot of the stuff he's done are parts for lots of different guns, and so of course you got to have a decent 3D printer, of course, but still,
Yeah, that's how they get away with the concept that it's not a gun, is that it's a part. But there are a lot of statutes which consider any part of a gun to be an entire gun.
No, I know that, but the point is that what's interesting, of course, there's no ammo. That's involved.
Well, even a part of a gun. You think about a trigger or a barrel or a stock.
But still, all this is the plans.
Right. I know.
It's just a blueprint.
Right.
So what you do with it is none of my business.
Right.
I mean, it's like so
There's
many
no
things.
material.
Yeah, no material at all.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of electrons, for God's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
So go get the guy with the 3D printer.
Right.
So anyway, okay. Let's see what have we got next here. This is this girl. This has been on quite a bit, which I thought was kind of interesting. I think this is the last thing I've got.
Okay.
No, it can't be. Hold on a second. Yeah. This was the last thing that I had, which is unfortunately I didn't get a chance to cut it way down. In early March, Lauren Southern, who's a big YouTuber,
Okay.
a Canadian darling of white supremacists, learned that she has been barred from the United Kingdom on account of her history of thinly veiled racism. She was traveling with her friend to the UK, and they didn't let her in. On Monday, 2 days ago, Australia media reported that Southern's application for an Australian visa had been denied. As Sky News' Ross Cameron tweeted, the Australian Visa Bureau had declined Southern's application for an electronic travel authority, and of course the reason they did was because she's a white supremacist, and she was going there to give talks in various venues around this thing about, and of course interestingly enough, she's traveling now.
Dangerous ideas.
Dangerous ideas, boy. That's exactly right. What's interesting to me, I read on the thing here, Southern had planned on visiting Australia to take part in a speaking tour alongside Stefan Molyneux. That's Free Domain Radio.
Yeah.
And he's quite the libertarian, and he's got podcasts almost every day.
Yeah.
He's got a huge website that's all donation.
Sounds like a white supremacist.
Yeah, sounds like a white supremacist, right? But he's been on for now 10 years or something. But he's got a huge website with millions of followers, and now he's been branded a white supremacist. And another Canadian theorist, like Southern, Molyneux denies he's a white supremacist, which of course he isn't.
They really? I was joking. They really?
No. Molyneux denies he's a white supremacist. What? Yeah. No, that's what the Australians are calling him.
I was totally joking.
No, but he's among other things claimed that the word racism is the new nigger, if you want to call it that, and stated that freedom has a eugenics component. Inevitably, Molyneux has also ranked races in their past according to a sweet spot, or whatever that means. I don't know. I mean, I listen to Molyneux all the time, and he's no more white supremacy. But what the way they call it white supremacy is that these people that are traveling around are for borders. Borders. You need to keep you're not a country without a border, and so that's what they're strongly for borders. Now, I know you're not, but I mean, but again, the fact is that, as I say, you can have a welfare state or you can have borders, but you can't have both. And so that's one of the things that's going. So anyway, they're talking a lot about.
Or you mean no borders?
Yeah, no borders. Yeah.
Well, okay.
So anyway, they go.
Well, Sweden, I heard, is having some issues with their immigration now.
Yeah, they are. Finally, they what. This is amazing. Of course, I mean, for somebody who speaks Arabic or whatever it is, or whatever they speak, to learn Swedish must be kind of a trip. But they don't have to, because they all live in these communities, where everybody does the same kind of thing. And so now they've been banned from New Zealand. And what they said was Auckland Mayor Phil Goff announced that Southern and Molyneux had been barred from speaking at any Auckland Council venues during their planned travel through New Zealand, a move that, according to the news, Southern and Molyneux's event organizers scrambling for new spaces. The AC Council, whatever it is, shouldn't be used to stir up ethnic or religious tensions. Views that divide rather than unite are repugnant, and I have made my views on that very clear, says this guy, whoever he is.
And I will say which views divide and which views unite.
Right, exactly. And of course, they also went on the heels of Poland's recent announcement that it had barred Spencer, who is they also call a white supremacist, from traveling through much of the European Union. All three of them, Southern, Molyneux, and Spencer, have advocated for, quote, strong borders. All three apparently have found founded governments that will listen. But I mean, this is the racist thing is strong borders. That's white supremacist, strong borders.
Yeah.
And of course, it was interesting because I heard there was a Tucker Carlson the other night had interviewed a fellow who was, and this was one of the few times that Tucker Carlson has basically cut somebody off. He got so mad. He was talking about this guy was saying all the stuff that was racist, and Tucker was saying, well, white privilege it was. That's what it was. And well, tell me what that is. And he went all over the place, and this is what he went all over the place. You can call it up. It was just this week.
There's a meme online which explains it, and what they do is they have a bunch of people line up on one side of a soccer field, and then they tell different people to take steps forward if you have this or that advantage, and then at the end there's supposed to be a race.
Right. Okay.
So that clearly.
Yeah, clearly right. Exactly right. No, it's interesting to see the real racists are the people that are claiming racism exists. I mean, they're the ones that are promoting this.
I'm sure there are pockets. I'm sure there are places where it's prevalent and where it's still part of this or that institution, or the New Orleans police department, parish, whatever.
Yeah.
There have to be places like that, but and I think that at this point people should start to discuss that issue in terms of geography, because I think that there are a lot of places where there is no normal racism. I mean, we live here in Florida. We live in a pretty egalitarian place on pretty much every level. I don't think it would be shocking if you were to see an overt act of racism, say in the Publix or whatever. From my perspective,
well, it would be a one-off thing. They show them on YouTube. I'm not on YouTube, but sometimes I'll see something where somebody's filmed.
Right. It would be something like that. Like, oh my God, look what just happened. It would be and that just shows you that as a community, we are all well adjusted, and
pretty rare. Yeah, they had one the other day where some citizen was wearing a Puerto Rican shirt, and the guy went off on her. Go back to Puerto Rico, and she says, "But I'm a U.S. Go back to Puerto as if you're not a U.S. citizen."
Right. Right. Go back to Puerto Rico. Get out of our country.
Get out of my country. Right.
Of course, we had lunch with our Puerto Rican friend the other day.
Yeah.
And immigration. Interestingly, I saw one of the Scandinavian countries. I can't remember if it was Denmark or the Netherlands, and they were talking about a very open border policy, and a policy that allowed the children of immigrants to be present. However, they intended to, or they passed a statute, I wish I had better information, which said that the child, starting at 1 year old, had to be separated from the parent for 25 hours a week for cultural
assimilation,
indoctrination training. In other words, we're going to tell you how to be Dutch or whatever it is,
or Danish, right?
Yeah, and it's just I think it's interesting, and the same with this New Zealand thing. We'll see how unfriendly certain places become at the official level based on some proposition of tolerance. Like, oh, we're exceedingly tolerant, so we're going to exclude all the people that we think are intolerant.
Right.
And we're going to go ahead and name those, and here's a big list.
Yeah, here's right. Matter of fact, I did see that. I saw a cartoon on that, for instance, and they said, I'm the most tolerant person in the world, but you can't live this, you can't, you know, these
That's
people,
right,
you know,
that's right.
and then that way you can't come here. I won't be your, you know, as you say, the fact that they want to do a speaking tour. I mean, Molyneux is a great speaker, number
Right.
one, and he's
Well, they're not there to like whoop up the populace into
No.
a riot or an electoral storm or anything like that. These guys are. Mullen is a psychologist, you know.
well, yeah.
I mean, that's his main gig. Is
Right.
He's like a philosopher psychologist or
yeah, right.
something. And I mean, how harmful is that?
Even if you are a white supremacist,
Mm-hmm.
and of course a lot of these people that they like, even Spencer,
Mm-hmm.
they branded him a white supremacist, but basically he's nonviolent
Mm-hmm.
at all. He advocates no violence at all. He just basically, you know, is one of these people that kind of like Mrs. Jimmy. You can come here, you obey our laws, you pay your taxes, you don't take anything from you have a job, you speak our language,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that kind of stuff, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You are assimilated.
I don't know. I never saw any of his stuff because unfortunately our stupid students here shouted him down before he could
right.
say anything.
Yeah, they did. They shouted him down. Right.
So
Well, I went on and watched a couple of his speeches at other places, but again, when some Antifa or other people, you know, riot or do something, or that one guy up in Charlottesville or whatever that ran the car and killed somebody, and they blame it on him, you know. But he's a nonviolent. I don't know. If,
right.
I mean, you know,
well, that was like during the election when they would say that the Trump rallies were full of violence.
yeah,
But when you went there, it was the people who were there to protest against the Trump
Right,
rallies that were
right.
bringing the violence.
that was it exactly.
And-
I mean, it was interesting to see they arrested this guy. The other day, in a Burger King or something, some guy went in and ripped this teenager's hat off. That had a
we
MAGA
talked about
hat.
that.
Huh?
Yeah, we mentioned
Oh,
that.
did we? Okay. Anyway, they arrested him, but still, that kind of, you don't see. I mean, I don't remember anybody during. I mean, there were some people that were totally anti-Obama, and they made it clear, especially in the Congress, that they weren't. For instance, when they decided to hold off his Supreme Court guy, and they were all upset about that. Of course, that's what they wanted to do with this one because it's quote an election year, but it's not really.
Well, but those are official moves versus,
Yeah.
we've talked about the civility issue, and I think people are sort of getting it under control, at least you hope. But I think, from my perspective, I would like to see more Democrat or this new Democratic Socialist leaders come out and decry some of the violence.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like that would be nice if they would come out and say, "Look, we're going to win based on our ideas.
Right.
We're not going to hack you up if we disagree with you or beat you to pulp or whatever it is, and let's go ahead and keep this intellectual."
Yeah, well, you know, like Maxine Waters says, she wants to harass everybody, no matter
Well,
where they
again, she walked it back a little bit. And,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I don't think she quite knows where the line is, but she walked it back and blamed it on Trump and such.
Yeah, well, that's what you always do. Anyway, that's what I have. So
Yeah, that's all I had as well. Didn't have much this week. From my
no, it's been
perspective,
kind of
so.
slow. What we'll do is we will be seeing. Of course, he's supposed to meet with Putin, I think, on Friday,
Oh yeah.
and so that we'll hear all the news, you know, about that stuff, and then on the Sunday talk shows, I suppose. Although I stopped listening to them pretty much, but because you pretty much can write their scripts.
Yeah, for the most part. Although I noticed McLaughlin was back,
Yes.
and so I'm going to check that out. I haven't actually watched a full one yet to see if it's.
Well, they're only 22 minutes or something.
Again,
No
I
ads.
haven't watched
No, they're
them.
20. They're 28 minutes. They're 28 minutes.
Yeah,
I think there's like one or two ads.
I started to watch one, but I can't stand Clarence Thomas, or not Clarence Thomas. Clarence,
No.
what's his name? The black guy that's on there. Isn't it Clarence?
Yeah, his name's Clarence,
Uh,
but it's
Thomas is the Supreme Court justice.
yeah, right.
Anyway, that guy, he's just full of platitudes every time he speaks. I like the new guy who's the host, the English guy, Tom,
Yeah.
whatever his name is.
Yeah,
And
you can always know what Eleanor's going to say.
yeah, she's going to toe the party line.
Yeah.
It's so
And-
obvious. It's amazing.
And of course, what's his name? our ex-president running for
Pat Buchanan.
right? You can always know what he's going to do. And then they always have a guest,
Yeah.
and the guests go the gamut.
Yeah. Yeah. They've got good information, which I like, but we'll see. I'll check them out.
Good.
But all right, hey, check us out.
We did get a couple of likes on our last one.
Oh, cool.
Even though the audio or the video was distorted.
Yeah. Well,
So-
hopefully it's better this time. I can see. I think it's been bad again, but I'll upload a nice version here in a few minutes. So.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Sunday, 4 o'clock.